almost deafening in the stillness of the night. Kira Blake's knuckles turned white as she gripped the cold metal railing, her heart pounding in her chest. The salt-laden wind whipped her dark hair into her face, but she barely noticed. Her mind was racing, trying to process the betrayal that stood before her. "Noah, please." Her voice was trembling, but she tried to steady it. She looked at her husband with wide, pleading eyes, searching for any hint of the man she had fallen in love with, the man she had built a life with. "This isn't you. You don't have to do this." Noah Davenport stood a few feet away, his shoulders tense. He looked like a stranger in the moonlight, his sharp features hardened by anger and something darker, something that sent a chill down Kira's spine. "Don't make this harder than it has to be," he said, his voice clipped and emotionless. "You always make things harder." Kira's chest tightened, and tears blurred her vision. "I don't understand," she whispered, shaking her head. "I've always been there for you, always supported you. How did we get here? How did you—" Her voice cracked, and she swallowed hard. "How did you become this?" Before Noah could answer, Melissa Monroe sauntered into view, her heels clicking against the polished deck. Melissa's lips curved into a smug smile as she leaned against Noah, her hand resting possessively on his arm. "Oh, Kira," Melissa said, her voice like honey laced with poison. "Still playing the victim, aren't you? It's almost pathetic." She tilted her head, her green eyes glinting with malice. "But you're always so self-righteous. It's exhausting." Kira's gaze darted between them, her stomach churning. "You!" she hissed, her voice shaking with fury. "You did this. You poisoned him against me." Melissa laughed, a low, mocking sound. "Oh, sweetheart, Noah didn't need much convincing. Do you know how miserable you made him? How small he felt next to your big, shiny life? I just gave him an alternative." "Stop it," Kira snapped, her voice breaking. "Just stop it." She turned to Noah, her tears spilling freely now. "Please, Noah, don't listen to her. Whatever she's told you, it's not true. We can fix this. We can fix us." Noah's jaw tightened, but he didn't move. His dark eyes were fixed on her, but there was no warmth in them. "It's too late, Kira," he said quietly. "You don't see it, do you? You've always been so perfect, so untouchable. Do you know what that feels like, to always be the second best, even in your own life?" Kira's breath hitched. "Second best?" she whispered. "Noah, you've never been second best to me. You've always been—" "Enough," he barked, his voice echoing across the water. He took a step closer, his expression hardening further. "This is the only way. Don't fight it, Kira. Just let go." Kira shook her head furiously, her heart pounding like a drum. "No, I won't let you do this. I won't do it," Melissa interrupted, her voice low and venomous. "We'll finally be free. She's just holding you back." Kira's eyes widened in disbelief as Noah's face contorted with something she couldn't quite name. He reached out and grabbed her hands, prying them off the railing one finger at a time. "Noah," she screamed, panic surging through her. "Noah, please don't do this, please." But he didn't stop. With one final shove, Kira felt herself lose her grip, her body lurching backward. The world spun, the icy wind rushing past her face as she plunged into the dark, freezing water below. The impact stole the breath from her lungs, and the cold was like 1,000 needles, piercing her skin all at once. She kicked and clawed, her head breaking the surface just long enough to gasp for air. "Noah," she cried, her voice weak and desperate. But the yacht was already pulling away, the sound of its engine drowning out her pleas. On the deck, Melissa turned to Noah, a satisfied smirk on her face. "That wasn't so hard, was it?" she said, raising an eyebrow. Noah didn't answer. He stared at the spot where Kira had disappeared, his hands trembling slightly. For a moment, it looked like he might regret what he'd done, but Melissa placed a hand on his chest, drawing his attention back to her. "Come on," she said smoothly. "It's over. Let's go." As the yacht sped into the distance, Kira fought to keep her head above water, the waves crashing over her again and again. Her body screamed with exhaustion, her muscles burning as the freezing ocean sapped her strength. She could still see the faint outline of the yacht disappearing on the horizon, taking with it everything she thought she knew about her life. But even as her body began to give out, a spark of determination ignited in her chest. "They think I'm done. They think they've won. But they're wrong." Kira Blake's journey hadn't been easy. Nothing in her life had ever been handed to her. She came from a small town where dreams were often stifled by reality, but Kira had always believed in more. Her mother, Rose, had been her first and greatest inspiration, a seamstress with an unmatched talent and a gentle heart. Kira could still picture her mother bent over the sewing machine late at night, her hands moving with practiced precision as she created beautiful dresses for women who could never afford the high-end boutique. "Your work speaks for you, Kira," her mother used to say, her soft voice carrying the wisdom of years. "If you pour your heart into something, the world will notice." That lesson had stuck with her, even after her mother passed away, leaving behind only a battered sewing kit and a collection of faded patterns. Kira carried that belief with her. It was what had driven her to take the leap and start her own clothing brand. She had started small, selling handmade dresses online and at local markets, one design at a time. Her first workshop had been her living room, her first models were her friends, and her first big break had come when a boutique owner in San Francisco took a chance on her designs. Over the years, Kira Designs had grown from a tiny, scrappy business into a renowned name in the fashion world. Her collections graced runways, and her flagship stores were a magnet for celebrities and socialites. But no matter how much success she achieved, Kira stayed grounded. She still carried her mother's sewing kit with her, a quiet reminder of where she came from and why she started. People admired her not just for her designs, but for the woman she was, kind, humble, and approachable, despite her fame. She made it a point to connect with everyone, from the seamstresses who worked in her factories to the clients who bought her most expensive pieces. "Style should be for everyone," she often said, her smile warm and genuine. "It's about feeling good in your own skin, not about fitting into someone else's box." But behind the glittering facade of her career, Kira's personal life was complicated. Her marriage to Noah Davenport, a man she had once thought was her soulmate, was not what it seemed. Noah had entered her life during her early days in San Francisco. Back then, he had been full of charm and ambition, with big dreams of his own. They had bonded over late-night conversations about building something meaningful, over shared hopes of leaving a mark on the world. Kira had fallen for his confidence, his easy smile, and the way he made her feel like she wasn't carrying her burdens alone. For a while, they had been a team. She supported his ventures, cheering him on as he tried one business idea after another. But as Kira's career took off and Noah's ventures failed to gain traction, something had shifted. The man who once seemed so supportive now carried a simmering resentment that Kira couldn't quite understand. "I'm proud of you, you know," she'd told him one night after a long day at her workshop. She had come home to find him sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone with a distant look on his face. "Yeah," he'd replied, not looking up. "Good for you." The tone had stung, but Kira had brushed it off. She had told herself he was just having a bad day. Everyone had bad days, but those bad days turned into weeks, then months. Noah grew colder, more distant. He started missing dinners, claiming he had meetings or plans with old friends. When they were together, he seemed distracted, his smiles forced. And yet Kira never stopped trying. She planned vacations, surprised him with gifts, and made excuses for his behavior when her friends asked about it. "He's under a lot of pressure," she'd explain, forcing a smile. "I think he just needs time." The truth was, she didn't want to admit to herself that the man she loved might no longer love her the same way. Kira had built a life on trust in her dreams, in her talent, in the people she cared about. Letting go of that trust felt like losing everything. And then there was Melissa Monroe. Melissa had entered Kira's world as a young, ambitious intern at Kira Designs. She had a sharp eye for trends and a knack for charming everyone she met. At first, Kira had taken Melissa under her wing, teaching her the ropes of the industry. "You remind me of myself," she had told her once, smiling as she watched Melissa sketch ideas on a notepad. But there had always been something about Melissa, a hunger, a restlessness, that Kira couldn't quite place. When Melissa was caught stealing designs and passing them off as her own, Kira had been heartbroken. She had given Melissa every opportunity, and this was how she repaid her. Still, Kira handled the situation quietly. firing Melissa without much fanfare. She didn't want to ruin the young woman's future, even if she deserved it. Melissa hadn't taken it well. "She thinks she's untouchable," Melissa had ranted to a friend later, her voice dripping with venom. "But no one stays on top forever." Kira didn't know it at the time, but Melissa would return to her life with a vengeance. And this time, she wouldn't be looking for mentorship. She'd be looking for revenge. Kira was too trusting, too focused on holding everything together to notice the shadows creeping into her world. But she would learn. Betrayal has a way of teaching lessons you never forget. Noah Davenport used to believe he was destined for greatness. He had a vision of himself as the kind of man people admired, the one who turned ideas into action and action into success. When he first met Kira, her energy had been magnetic. She saw something in him that even he had started to doubt. "You've got it in you," she'd said, with that radiant smile of hers. And for a while, Noah believed her. In those early years when they were both chasing their dreams, their partnership had felt unstoppable. Kira's faith in him had been like fuel, pushing him through every failed pitch and dead-end deal. But as time went on, their paths began to diverge. Kira's brand, Kira Designs, took off in ways neither of them had expected. Her designs were everywhere, on runways, in magazines, on celebrities. Meanwhile, Noah's ventures floundered, one after another. The failed tech startup, the short-lived consulting firm, the investment in a friend's bar that never saw a profit. Each one chipped away at his confidence. At first, he was proud of Kira. "You're amazing," he'd tell her, pulling her into a hug after another glowing article about her work. "I don't know how you do it." But somewhere along the way, pride turned into something darker. Every time he heard someone call him Kira's husband, it felt like a jab. At events, he'd stand off to the side, watching as people surrounded her, showering her with praise. "You must be so proud of her," they'd say, and he'd force a smile, nodding through clenched teeth. The words sounded like pity to him, a reminder that he was the guy who couldn't keep up with his wife's success. It wasn't just the public moments that stung. At home, Kira seemed to have an endless reservoir of energy. She'd come back from long days at the office, still smiling, still ready to listen to him talk about his ideas. She never rubbed her success in his face, but that only made it worse. It made him feel smaller, like he was the weak link in their marriage. And then there was his family. Kira had always been generous with them, helping cover bills when they struggled, even paying for his parents' medical expenses without hesitation. Noah had tried to see it as an act of love, but every time his mom thanked him, a bitter taste filled his mouth. "We're so lucky to have you, Noah," his mother would say, smiling as if he'd been the one to send the check. At first, he corrected her. "It's Kira's doing, Mom," he'd admit, shifting uncomfortably in his seat. But she'd wave it off. "You're the one who takes care of us, Noah. That's what matters." Eventually, he stopped trying to explain. It was easier to let them believe the lie than to face their disappointment. But the guilt festered, and with it, resentment. Every dollar Kira spent on his family felt like another reminder of his failures, of the fact that he couldn't provide for them on his own. Kira, ever supportive, had tried to help him find his footing. "Why don't you manage one of my stores?" she'd suggested one evening over dinner. "It could be a good way to get back into the swing of things." Noah had hesitated, but she'd been so encouraging, so sincere, that he finally agreed. At first, he threw himself into the role, determined to prove her right. But running a store wasn't as simple as he'd imagined. There were endless reports to read, employees to manage, and numbers to crunch. When the store's profits began to dip, Noah didn't know how to fix it. Instead of asking for help, he started avoiding the problem, hoping it would resolve itself. It didn't. When Kira found out, she didn't get angry. She sat down with him, walked him through the reports, and gently offered solutions. "We'll figure this out together," she'd said, placing a reassuring hand on his. But her kindness only made him feel worse. To him, it felt like another confirmation that she didn't see him as capable. Around this time, Melissa Monroe re-entered their lives, and now she was working for a competing brand. Melissa Monroe knew exactly what she was doing. She had seen him across the room at that networking event, his shoulders slumped in a way that suggested defeat, and his eyes darting around like he was looking for an escape. It was easy to approach him, sliding into his line of sight with a practiced smile and a casual, "Noah, "Is that you? It's been forever." Her voice was smooth, laced with just the right amount of warmth. It caught Noah off guard, and he blinked, his brow furrowing before recognition dawned. "Melissa?" he said, his tone cautious but polite. "Wow, yeah, it's been a while." Melissa tilted her head, her smile widening as she closed the distance between them. "It really has. You're looking, well." She let the words hang in the air, her gaze lingering just long enough to make him slightly uncomfortable. "How's life treating you? I imagine things must be incredible with Kira's empire booming." Noah shifted on his feet, glancing away briefly before forcing a smile. "It's good. Busy." Melissa's laugh was light, but there was a sharpness behind it. "Busy, sure. Must be hard keeping up with someone like her." Noah's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. Melissa noticed, of course. She noticed everything. Over the next few minutes, she carefully steered the conversation, dropping small, seemingly innocent remarks that pricked at Noah's insecurities. "Kira's always had that magic touch, hasn't she?" she mused, swirling her drink. "It's impressive. I mean, it's not easy being the face of an entire brand and still having time for everything else. I imagine that leaves not much room for you?" Noah's smile faltered for a moment, but he recovered quickly. "She manages," he said, though the words came out clipped, almost defensive. Melissa leaned in slightly, lowering her voice as though sharing a secret. "I didn't mean it like that. I always thought you had big dreams too, Noah, and I hate to think of you feeling sidelined." That was how it started. Melissa was careful, never outright criticizing Kira, at least not at first. Instead, she framed her comments as concern for Noah, making it seem like she was the only one who truly saw him. And Noah, hungry for validation, began to open up more with each conversation. "She doesn't do it on purpose," he said one evening over drinks, after they'd started meeting regularly. "It's just, she doesn't get it. What it's like to feel small, like nothing you do is ever good enough." Melissa nodded, her expression thoughtful. "That sounds exhausting, always having to play catch up even when you're trying your best." Noah let out a bitter laugh. "Exactly. And it's not like she rubs it in. She's kind, too kind, which somehow makes it worse." Melissa reached across the table, placing her hand lightly over his. "You deserve more than that, Noah. More than just being Kira's as a portive husband. You're better than that." The physical contact was brief, but it lingered in Noah's mind long after they parted ways. As their meetings became more frequent, Melissa began to let her true colors show. "She doesn't see you," she said one night, her tone edged with venom. "Not really. You're just part of her image, the perfect husband to complete her perfect life." "That's not fair," Noah said weakly, though he didn't sound convinced. Melissa leaned back, crossing her arms. "Isn't it? Think about it. When was the last time she asked what you wanted? When was the last time she let you take the lead?" Noah opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. Melissa smirked. "Exactly." Soon the conversation shifted. Melissa wasn't just listening anymore. She was steering the ship. "You know, you don't have to live like this forever," she said one evening, her voice low and conspiratorial. Noah frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you could take control, start fresh." Without her, Melissa leaned closer, her eyes gleaming. "She's holding you back, Noah. You're miserable and she doesn't even notice. Why should she get to keep everything while you waste away in her shadow?" Noah hesitated, the words stirring something dark and restless in him. "I don't know." "You do know," Melissa pressed. "You've just been too scared to admit it." The first time Melissa mentioned getting rid of Kira, Noah had laughed, assuming she was joking, but she wasn't. "I'm serious," she'd said, her tone deadly calm. "She's in the way, Noah. You deserve to be happy, and honestly, she'd probably thank you for it if she knew how much better off you'd both be." Noah had been horrified, at least at first. "Melissa, I can't. I'm not. That's insane." "Is it?" Melissa countered, her voice soft and persuasive. "Accidents happen all the time. People move on. And you'd finally have the freedom to live your life the way you want." Days turned into weeks, and Melissa kept planting seeds of doubt and resentment. "What if her car's brakes just failed?" she suggested one day, her tone casual, as though she were discussing the weather. "It happens. Or maybe she drinks the wrong cup of coffee. I mean, she's always so busy. She wouldn't notice if someone else switched things around." Noah balked at first, but over time, Melissa's words began to feel less like wild suggestions and more like possibilities. She made it sound so simple, so logical. "We'd finally be free," she whispered one night, her hand brushing against his. "No more stress, no more pretending, just us." And Noah, drowning in his own bitterness and self-pity, began to consider it. The morning sunlight streamed into the Blake household, filling the kitchen with with a soft golden glow. The scent of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the faint aroma of jasmine from the garden just outside. Kira sat at the dining table, her laptop open, as she flipped through a new collection of fabric samples. Her mind buzzed with ideas for her upcoming winter line, and she absent-mindedly reached for her coffee cup. "Good morning, ma'am," Grace said cheerfully, stepping into the room. The older woman carried a tray of fresh fruit and pastries, her sharp eyes scanning the space as she set it down. Grace had been with Kira for years, and while she was efficient and professional, she had always treated Kira more like a daughter than an employer. "Morning, Grace," Kira replied, not looking up. "You're a lifesaver, as always." Grace smiled warmly, but her gaze shifted to Noah, who stood by the counter, pouring himself a cup of coffee. He looked tense, his movements stiff. Grace noticed how his eyes flickered toward Kira's cup before darting away. Her stomach twisted with unease, but she kept her expression neutral. "Did you sleep well, Noah?" Grace asked casually, picking up a dishcloth to wipe down the counter. Noah didn't answer right away. "Yeah," he said finally, though his tone was clipped. He added a spoonful of sugar to his cup, stirring it too hard. The clinking of the spoon against the ceramic echoed in the quiet kitchen. Grace's instincts told her something wasn't right. She saw how Noah's hand trembled slightly as he lifted his cup to his lips. Her eyes flicked to Kira's cup, sitting untouched on the table. It wasn't unusual for Noah to make Kira coffee in the mornings. He'd done it countless times before, but today something felt off. Kira reached for the cup again, her fingers brushing the handle. "This coffee smells amazing," she murmured. "I really need it today." Grace's heart raced. She moved quickly, grabbing the tray of pastries and placing it on the table, subtly blocking Kira's hand. "Oh, ma'am, I almost forgot," Grace said, her tone light and conversational. "The landscapers are working near the garage today. I'd recommend using the SUV if you're heading out. The sedan might get blocked in." Kira blinked, taken aback by the sudden comment. "The SUV?" she repeated. "I hadn't planned on going anywhere, but sure. Thanks for letting me know." Grace nodded, relief washing over her. She picked up Kira's coffee cup under the pretense of clearing the table. "I'll freshen this up for you," she added, giving Kira a reassuring smile. As Grace moved toward the sink, her grip on the cup tightened. Her instincts told her this was more than just paranoia. She dumped the coffee down the drain, rinsing the cup thoroughly before refilling it with a fresh brew from the pot she had made earlier that morning. Later that day, Noah found Melissa waiting for him in the parking lot of his office building. Her red lips curled into a satisfied smile as she leaned against her sleek car. "Well?" she asked as he approached. Noah sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "She didn't drink it." Melissa's smile faltered. "What do you mean she didn't drink it? I told you to make sure it worked." "I tried," Noah hissed, glancing around nervously. "Grace switched the cups or something. I don't know. She's always hovering." Melissa's eyes narrowed. "That nosy old maid. She's going to be a problem." A week later, Melissa was waiting in the driveway of Kira's house. Noah emerged from the garage, wiping his hands on a rag, his face pale but determined. "The brakes are cut," Noah said, his voice tight. "She won't see it coming." Melissa smirked. "Perfect. One less problem." Grace watched from the kitchen window, her sharp eyes following every movement. Her stomach churned as she saw Noah and Melissa exchange a knowing look before Melissa drove away. Grace's mind raced. If they were willing to go this far, what else were they capable of? When Kira came downstairs later that evening, Grace intercepted her. "Ma'am, can I suggest something?" she said, her tone casual but firm. "Of course, Grace. What is it?" Grace hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "The SUV is much more comfortable for long drives. You've mentioned that before, right? Maybe it's best to stick with it, at least for now." Kira frowned, but nodded. "Sure, I don't mind." Grace let out a quiet sigh of relief. For weeks, Grace continued to observe, documenting every suspicious conversation and action. She installed a small recording device in the kitchen after overhearing a hushed argument between Noah and Melissa. She captured snippets of their schemes, their whispered plans to get rid of Kira. One evening, as she replayed the latest recording, her heart sank. Melissa's voice was cold and calculated. "It doesn't matter how many times we fail, Noah. We'll get her eventually. She's too trusting, too distracted. It's only a matter of time." Noah's response was quieter, but the bitterness was clear. "She has no idea what's coming." Grace clenched her fists. "What? They thought Kira was alone, defenseless, but they were wrong. Grace wasn't just a bystander. She was going to protect Kira no matter what it took. Every piece of evidence Grace collected was carefully stored, waiting for the day they would need it most. She had seen enough to know that Noah and Melissa's game was far from over, but she also knew one thing for certain: their time was running out. Noah had been unusually attentive for the past few days, his tone softer, his gestures more considerate. Kira had noticed the shift, though she couldn't quite place its origin. After months of distance between them, the sudden change felt strange. But when he suggested a trip, just the two of them, to celebrate their anniversary, she had pushed aside her unease. "You've been working so hard," Noah had said over dinner the week before, his voice earnest as he refilled her glass of wine. "We haven't taken time for ourselves in forever. Let's get away for a night, just us. The yacht's been sitting unused. Let's take it out, watch the sunset, have some champagne like we used to." Kira hesitated, her fork hovering above her plate. "The yacht?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "It's been ages since we've been on that thing." Noah reached across the table, taking her hand in his. The warmth of his touch surprised her. "That's exactly why. I want to remind you of how it used to be, before work and life got so crazy. Let me do this for us." The sincerity in his voice softened her doubts. Maybe this was his way of trying to mend things. After all, they had been distant, both of them caught in the storm of her growing business and his struggles to find his footing. She gave him a small smile, squeezing his hand. "Okay, Noah. Let's do it." Unbeknownst to Kira, while she saw the trip as a chance to repair their frayed bond, Noah was silently calculating how to make sure it would be their last night together. The soft lapping of waves against the dock created a tranquil symphony as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting hues of orange and pink across the sky. The yacht, sleek and gleaming, was docked and waiting, its polished rails glinting in the fading light. Kira stood at the edge of the dock, her arms wrapped around herself to fend off the evening chill. She glanced at Noah, who was busy adjusting a rope, his movements brisk and purposeful. "This feels spontaneous," Kira said, a hesitant smile tugging at her lips. "You planning a romantic evening, Noah? That's not like you." Noah straightened, giving her a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "You've been so busy, Kira. You deserve a break. I thought it would be nice for us to have some time away from everything. Just the two of us." Kira's gaze softened, though a flicker of doubt crept in. Noah's sudden enthusiasm for romance seemed out of character, but she pushed the thought aside. "It's a beautiful evening," she said, her voice light. "I guess I could use a break." Noah gestured toward the yacht. "Then let's go. The water's calm and the stars will be out soon. Perfect timing." As they boarded the yacht, Kira felt a pang of nostalgia. She remembered how excited they'd been when they bought the boat, dreaming of weekends spent exploring the coast. It had been years since they'd taken it out together. She glanced around, noting the neatly arranged table set for two. Candles flickered in the evening breeze, and the faint scent of roses hung in the air. Noah had clearly put thought into this, and she felt a pang of guilt for doubting his intentions. She glanced at Noah, hoping to catch a glimpse of the man she'd fallen in love with, but his face was hard, his jaw clenched. As Noah secured the ropes, Kira thought she heard a soft noise, a thud almost imperceptible from somewhere below deck. She turned, her brow furrowing. "Did you hear that?" Noah moved quickly, stepping between her and the cabin door. "Probably just the yacht settling. Don't worry about it." He placed a hand on her shoulder, guiding her toward the table. "Sit, relax. Dinner will be ready soon." Despite his reassuring tone, Kira couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. She glanced back at the cabin door, her unease growing, but Noah poured her a glass of champagne, drawing her attention back to him. "To us," he said, raising his glass, his gaze intent. Kira hesitated before clinking her glass against his. "To us," she repeated softly, trying to match his enthusiasm. The dinner was exquisite. Noah had prepared her favorite dishes, the candlelight casting a warm glow over the table. For a brief moment, Kira allowed herself to believe that maybe this was the fresh start they needed. But when she excused herself to freshen up, the unease returned, gnawing at her. As she walked toward the cabin, she thought she heard voices. Pausing at the partially open door, Kira's heart froze. She doesn't suspect a thing. a woman's voice said. Melissa's voice. She'd better not, Noah replied, his tone low and tense. Kira's pulse quickened as she peeked through the gap. Melissa stood close to Noah, her expression smug. She was dressed in casual but elegant attire, her presence completely out of place. She's out of the way tonight, Melissa continued, her voice cold. Once it's done, we can finally move on. Noah sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. I just want this over with. Kira's stomach churned, her mind racing. She'd left her phone on the table. There was no way to call for help. She pressed her back against the wall, trying to steady her breathing. She had to think fast. Moments later, Kira stepped back onto the deck, her face composed, but her heart pounding. She moved toward the table, picking up her phone as casually as she could, but Noah's voice startled her. Everything okay? He asked, stepping out of the cabin, Melissa lingering behind him. Kira nodded, forcing a smile. Yeah, just needed some air. Kira sat down, her mind working frantically. She needed a plan, but before she could think of one, Melissa stepped onto the deck, her sudden appearance sending a shockwave through Kira. Melissa? Kira asked, her voice edged with disbelief. What are you doing here? Melissa smiled, a slow, calculated curve of her lips. Oh, I've been helping Noah set everything up. He wanted tonight to be perfect for you. Kira's unease boiled into anger. Perfect. What's going on here, Noah? Noah's expression hardened, and he took a step toward her. You've always been so smart, Kira. Figure it out. Kira's eyes darted between them. You're both insane, she spat, rising from her chair. Noah moved quickly, grabbing her wrist. Don't make this harder than it has to be. Melissa stepped closer, her tone dripping with malice. You always thought you were better than everyone else, didn't you? Well, guess what? Tonight you're nothing. Kira yanked her arm free, backing toward the railing. You won't get away with this, she said, her voice trembling. Melissa laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. Oh, we already have. Noah advanced, his face a mask of cold detachment. Goodbye, Kira, he muttered. Before Kira could respond, he lunged, gripping her shoulders and shoving her over the edge. Her scream pierced the night, cut short by the icy water below. The cold was biting, and every muscle in Kira's body screamed in protest as she struggled against the relentless waves. Her breaths were shallow, each one stolen from the icy grip of the sea. Her arms flailed as she fought to stay afloat, her legs kicking instinctively, despite the weight of her soaked clothes dragging her down. The taste of salt water stung her lips, and her vision blurred with a mix of tears and exhaustion. She could barely see the lights of the yacht growing smaller and smaller in the distance, and her heart sank. They were gone. They had really left her to die. No, she whispered hoarsely, choking on salt water. No, I won't let it end like this. Her mind screamed at her to fight. She had too much to lose, too much to prove. Through the chaos of the waves, she spotted something dark and jagged protruding from the water. A large rock jutting out of the sea just a few meters away. Summoning every ounce of strength she had left, Kira kicked harder, her arms slicing through the freezing water. The current fought her, pulling her in every direction, but she focused on the rock, willing herself to reach it. Her fingers scraped against the rough, wet surface, and she gripped it tightly, coughing and gasping for air. The rock was cold and slippery, but it was solid, a lifeline in the chaos. She clung to it, her chest heaving, her body trembling violently from the cold. For what felt like hours, Kira stayed there, pressed against the rock, her eyes scanning the dark horizon for any sign of hope. Her muscles ached and her soaked clothes clung to her like dead weight, but she refused to let go. She thought of Noah's face as he shoved her, Melissa's smug smirk and the life she'd fought so hard to build. A faint hum in the distance broke through the sound of the waves. Kira's heart leapt. She squinted into the darkness, and there it was, a boat, its lights cutting through the night. It was moving slowly, close enough that she might have a chance. With renewed energy, Kira pushed off the rock, forcing her arms and legs to move. Her voice was hoarse, but she screamed with everything she had. Help, please! The boat didn't stop at first, and panic clawed at her chest. She waved her arms, splashing frantically to draw attention. Over here, please! Finally, the boat's engine slowed and the spotlight swept across the water. Kira felt the beam catch her, and relief flooded through her. The boat turned, drawing closer. Hang on, a voice called out. Moments later, strong hands grabbed her, pulling her out of the freezing abyss and onto the deck. She collapsed, coughing violently as water streamed from her lips. Her rescuer knelt beside her, wrapping a thick, weathered jacket around her trembling shoulders. "You're safe now," the man said, his voice gruff but kind. His face was rugged, lined with years of hard work at sea, but his eyes were warm with concern. "What in God's name happened out there?" Kira tried to speak, but her throat felt raw and her teeth chattered uncontrollably. They tried to kill me," she managed to whisper. The fisherman's brow furrowed. Who did this to you?" Kira shook her head, tears mixing with the seawater on her face. "My husband and his mistress. They left me to drown." The man's expression darkened. "Bastards," he muttered under his breath. He stood, moving swiftly to the cabin. "You're coming with me. We'll get you warmed up and then we'll figure out what to do." The next few hours were a blur. Kira was wrapped in blankets and given a steaming cup of tea that burned her throat but spread warmth through her chest. The fisherman, whose name was Walter, kept the conversation light, sensing that she needed time to gather her thoughts. "You're lucky I was out there tonight," he said, as they docked at a small, quiet marina. "Most folks wouldn't have been." Kira nodded, clutching the blanket tightly around her. "Thank you. You saved my life." Walter gave her a small, reassuring smile. "You rest now, miss. Whatever's happened, you're stronger than it." In the days that followed, Kira stayed in a small, discreet motel arranged by Walter. She avoided the news and social media, needing time to heal both physically and emotionally. Her body was bruised and battered, but her spirit, though shaken, refused to break. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Noah's face, cold and determined, as he shoved her into the water. Melissa's smirk haunted her dreams, but instead of drowning in despair, Kira used those memories to fuel her resolve. She was alive, and they didn't know it. That gave her an advantage. A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts one afternoon. Her heart leapt with panic, but when she peered through the peephole, relief washed over her. Grace was standing there, her expression worried but determined. "Kira," Grace exclaimed as the door opened. She pulled her into a hug, her voice trembling. "I've been so worried. I thought they'd—" "I'm okay," Kira said softly, though her voice wavered. "Thanks to you." Grace pulled back, her eyes searching Kira's face. "I couldn't stay silent, not after everything I saw. I have proof, everything they've been doing." Kira's breath caught. "Proof?" Grace nodded, pulling a small flash drive from her pocket. "I've been recording them, their conversations, their plans, even when Melissa poisoned your coffee and Noah tampered with your brakes. I couldn't let them hurt you." Kira stared at the flash drive, her hands trembling as she took it. "Grace, you risked everything for me." Grace smiled faintly. "You've done so much for me, Kira. I couldn't just stand by and watch them destroy you." The weight of Grace's words settled over Kira like a warm blanket. "We're going to use this," Kira said, her voice steady. "We're going to expose them for who they really are." Grace nodded, her eyes fierce. "I'm with you every step of the way." As they sat together, laying out their plan, Kira felt a surge of determination. She had been betrayed in the most unforgivable way, but she wasn't going to let them win. The day started early for Kira. She sat at the small table in her motel room, papers spread out in front of her like a puzzle waiting to be solved. Grace had already left for her morning shift, promising to check in later. In the quiet hum of the room, Kira felt the weight of everything she had lost and everything she still had to fight for. She ran a hand through her hair, scanning the documents Grace had collected. Among them were receipts, emails, and recorded conversations. It was damning evidence, but it wasn't quite enough. She needed more, something definitive, something that would leave Noah and Melissa with no room to wriggle free. Her phone buzzed on the table and she grabbed it quickly. It was Jack Reynolds, the private investigator Grace had recommended. His deep, steady voice greeted her as she answered. "Morning, Kira. I've been digging into Noah and Melissa, and I think we've got something solid to work with." Kira leaned forward, her pulse quickening. "What did you find?" "Well," Jack started, "for starters, there's a trail of embezzlement. Your company's accounts have been drained over the last 6 months, large sums funneled into an offshore account under Melissa's name. Noah was in on it too, transferring funds from your smaller stores to cover their tracks." Kira's stomach tightened. "They were stealing from me all along." "Looks like it," Jack said grimly. "But that's not all. I also came across someone who might be holding something big, Hugo Salazar. He's got a reputation for blackmail. From what I've gathered, he has evidence against Noah and Melissa, but it's going to cost us to get it." Kira frowned. "Why hasn't he gone to the police if he has evidence?" Jack let out a dry laugh. "Hugo doesn't do anything unless unless there's a payday involved. He doesn't care about justice, just leverage. Kira's grip on the phone tightened. Can you set up a meeting? Already working on it, Jack replied. But I need you to be prepared. Hugo's not the kind of guy you negotiate with lightly. He's sharp, and he'll try to squeeze as much out of us as he can. Kira nodded, determination hardening her resolve. I don't care what it takes, Jack. I need that evidence. Later that evening, Jack called back with an address, an unassuming bar on the outskirts of the city. Kira arrived just before sunset, her heart pounding as she stepped out of her car. Jack was already there, waiting outside with a reassuring nod. You ready for this? He asked, his voice low. As ready as I'll ever be, Kira replied, steeling herself. Inside, the bar was dimly lit, the air heavy with the scent of stale beer and cigarette smoke. A few patrons lingered at the counter, but it was clear Hugo had chosen a secluded corner booth away from prying eyes. Jack led the way, and as they approached, Hugo looked up from his drink, his sharp eyes raking over Kira. He was a wiry man with slicked back hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. You must be the woman everyone's talking about, Hugo said, leaning back in his seat. His voice was smooth, but there was an edge to it that made Kira uneasy. Kira forced herself to stay composed. You have something I need, she said, keeping her voice steady. Hugo's smile widened. I might, but the question is, what's it worth to you? Jack stepped forward, his tone firm. Let's not play games, Hugo. We know you've been in contact with Noah and Melissa. We also know you've got evidence that could expose them. Hugo chuckled, swirling his drink. Evidence is a powerful thing, and power, my friends, doesn't come cheap. Kira leaned in, her gaze locking onto his. Name your price. He paused, studying her. 100,000, cash. Jack let out a low whistle. That's steep, even for you. Hugo shrugged, unbothered. Supply and demand. You want the proof? I want my payout. Simple. Kira's hands clenched into fists under the table, but she kept her voice calm. And how do I know you'll hand over everything once you're paid? Hugo smirked. You don't, but I'm a man of my word, and I've got no interest in playing favorites. I want out of this mess just as much as you do. Jack glanced at Kira, silently asking if she was ready to make the call. She nodded. You'll get your money, she said firmly, but if you double-cross us, relax, Hugo interrupted, raising his hands in mock surrender. You'll have everything I've got. The deal was made, and the next day Jack and Kira returned with the money. True to his word, Hugo handed over a flash drive and a stack of documents. Everything's there, Hugo said, slipping the cash into a worn briefcase. Those two idiots got sloppy. Kira's heart raced as she took the drive, clutching it tightly in her hand. Thank you, she said. Hugo winked. Don't thank me, sweetheart. Just make sure they get what's coming to them. Back at the motel, Kira and Jack reviewed the files together. Audio recordings of Noah and Melissa plotting her murder, emails detailing their financial schemes, and a video of Melissa transferring stolen funds. Kira's hands trembled as she closed the laptop. This is it, she said, her voice thick with emotion. This is what we need to take them down. Jack placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. You've got them, Kira. Now it's time to finish this. As Kira stared at the pile of evidence, a fire ignited in her chest. It was time to make them pay. The conference room at Kira Designs was a picture of sleek modernity with its polished glass walls, leather chairs, and a large screen at the far end of the room. The air buzzed with hushed conversations as board members, key investors, and select media representatives settled into their seats. This meeting had been called on short notice, and speculation about its purpose was rampant. Noah Davenport strode in with Melissa Monroe at his side. He wore his usual smug expression, a thin veil of confidence that didn't quite mask the tension in his shoulders. Melissa, dressed in a striking red suit, smirked as she scanned the room, her eyes flickering with amusement at the murmurs of uncertainty. Moments later, the room fell silent as the door opened and Kira stepped in. Heads turned and gasps rippled through the crowd. Noah froze, his blood running cold. No, it's not possible, he whispered under his breath. Melissa's smirk faltered, her hand tightening on the edge of the table. How? She hissed, her voice barely audible. Kira walked with purpose, her chin held high and her eyes blazing with determination. She reached the head of the table, turned to face the crowd, and let the silence hang for a moment. Good afternoon, Kira began, her voice steady but firm. Thank you all for being here today. I know this meeting was called unexpectedly, but what I have to share with you could not wait. She looked directly at Noah and Melissa, her gaze piercing. Some of you may have heard rumors about trouble within my company or within my life. Today I'm here to set the record straight. Melissa shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her fingers drumming on the table. Noah, on the other hand, stared at Kira, his mind racing. How was she here? They had left her for dead. Kira pressed a button on the remote in her hand, and the large screen behind her came to life. The room dimmed, and the first recording began to play. Grace's familiar voice echoed through the speakers. I saw Noah tampering with the brakes on Kira's car. I didn't want to believe it at first, but here's the proof. The video footage was grainy but clear enough. It showed Noah in the garage, crouched by the driver's side of Kira's car, his hands fumbling with the brake lines. Gasps erupted around the room. Melissa's face drained of color. "Wait," Noah blurted, rising from his seat. "This isn't what it looks like." Kira raised a hand, silencing him. "Oh, it's exactly what it looks like," she said coldly. She clicked the remote again, and the next recording played. This time, it was Melissa's voice. "Just add it to her coffee. She won't suspect a thing." The screen showed Grace in the kitchen, switching the coffee cups and murmuring to herself, "Not today, Melissa, not today." Kira turned to the room. "And these are just the beginning. Over the last several months, Noah and Melissa have not only plotted my demise, but they've also embezzled funds from my company, putting your investments at risk." She clicked again, and the screen displayed a series of financial records. Red circles highlighted large withdrawals and transfers to an offshore account under Melissa's name. "You don't know what you're talking about," Melissa shouted, standing abruptly. "This is all circumstantial. You're just trying to frame us because you can't handle losing control." Kira didn't flinch. She looked directly at Melissa, her voice cutting through the tension. "You tried to kill me, Melissa. Both of you did, and you failed. But even if I had died, you would have never won. You would have lost everything." Noah finally broke, his voice cracking as he turned on Melissa. "This was your idea. You pushed me into this. I didn't even want to go that far." Melissa whipped around, her face twisting with fury. "Are you seriously blaming me? You're the one who couldn't handle being in her shadow. You wanted her gone just as much as I did." Their argument escalated, voices overlapping as they hurled blame at each other. The room watched in stunned silence, the perfect picture of their unraveling relationship on full display. Just then, the sound of footsteps echoed through the corridor. The door swung open, and two uniformed police officers stepped inside, accompanied by Detective Harris. "Mr. Davenport, Miss Monroe," Harris announced, his voice calm but firm. "You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, and embezzlement." Noah stumbled back, his face pale. "Wait, no, you can't do this. You don't understand." Melissa glared at him, her defiance waning as the officers approached. "This isn't over," she hissed at Kira. "You think you've won, but you haven't." Kira stepped closer, her voice low and steady. "Oh, it's over, Melissa. You'll finally face the consequences of everything you've done." As the officers led Noah and Melissa out of the room, the weight in Kira's chest began to lift. She turned back to the stunned audience, her voice regaining its strength. "This company is built on trust, integrity, and resilience," Kira said. "Today, I take back control of what's mine. Thank you for standing by me." The room erupted in applause, but Kira barely heard it. Her focus was on the horizon, where a new chapter awaited. A chapter where she would rebuild not just her company, but her life. The courtroom buzzed with quiet anticipation, the air heavy with tension as the final day of Noah and Melissa's trial began. Rows of onlookers filled the seats, some curious, others simply drawn by the gravity of the case that had captured headlines. At the center of it all sat Kira Blake, poised and calm, her presence commanding but not overbearing. When the bailiff called her name, Kira stood, smoothing the fabric of her dress with trembling hands. She quickly steadied. As she made her way to the stand, she glanced briefly at Noah and Melissa. Noah's face was pale, a shadow of the man who had once stood beside her at the altar. Melissa, on the other hand, tried to hold her usual smug expression, but there was a flicker of unease in her eyes. It was the first crack Kira had seen in her carefully constructed facade. Kira settled into the witness chair and adjusted the microphone. Her lawyer nodded at her from across the room, a silent gesture of encouragement. Taking a deep breath, Kira began her testimony. "I built my life on trust," she said, her voice steady despite the lump forming in her throat. "I believed in the people I loved. I believed in Noah. I believed that our life together was built on the same values of hard work and honesty that I carried into everything I did, but I was wrong. She paused, letting her words sink in. Noah Davenport and Melissa Monroe betrayed that trust in every way imaginable. They embezzled from my company, endangered my employees' livelihoods, and plotted— Her voice caught for a moment, but she recovered quickly. Plotted to end my life. They didn't just try to take what I built. They tried to take me. The prosecutor played Grace's recordings next. The audio filled the courtroom, Melissa's voice cool and manipulative as she whispered plans of poisoning and sabotage. Noah's voice followed, more hesitant but complicit nonetheless. Gasps rippled through the audience, and Kira noticed Noah sinking lower in his chair, his shoulders hunched as if trying to disappear. When the video of the yacht incident played, Kira looked away. She couldn't bear to relive that moment, though the jury's horrified expressions confirmed the impact it had made. Melissa glared at the screen, her jaw clenched so tightly it seemed it might snap. By the time Kira finished her testimony, the courtroom was silent. The prosecutor turned to the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, the evidence speaks for itself. This was not an accident. This was cold, calculated malice. The defense tried to spin their story. Melissa played the role of a desperate woman misled by Noah, while Noah painted himself as a man manipulated by Melissa. Their arguments unraveled quickly under cross-examination. The jury wasn't fooled. When the verdict was read, guilty on all charges, a wave of relief washed over Kira. As Noah and Melissa were led away in handcuffs, Melissa shot her a venomous glare. "You'll regret this, Kira," she spat, her voice low and sharp. Kira met her gaze, unflinching. "I already have, but you won't haunt me anymore." After the trial, life moved forward with a kind of peaceful clarity Kira hadn't known in months. Grace became more than just her housemaid. She became her confidant, a friend who had stood by her when everything fell apart. In the weeks that followed, Kira found herself reclaiming pieces of her life. She moved into a new home, a charming place by the water where she could hear the soothing sound of waves lapping at the shore. It was smaller than the house she had shared with Noah, but it felt infinitely larger in its promise of peace. One afternoon, as Kira unpacked boxes in her new home, Grace approached with a mug of tea. "You've been working nonstop," Grace said, a hint of affection in her tone. "Take a break," Kira smiled, taking the mug gratefully. "You're starting to sound like my mother," she teased lightly, though the mention of her mother brought a bittersweet pang to her chest. "Well, someone has to look out for you," Grace replied, settling into the chair across from her. "And besides, I think she'd be proud of you." Kira glanced out the window, watching the sunlight dance on the water. "I hope so," she murmured. "She always told me to stand tall, no matter what life threw my way." That evening, Kira stood before the mirror, adjusting her blazer. She was heading to the headquarters of Kira Designs for the first time since the trial. Her nerves hummed, but they were outweighed by a quiet confidence she hadn't felt in years. When she stepped into the lobby, the sound of applause greeted her. Her team, her loyal, steadfast team, stood there clapping and smiling as if they'd been waiting just for her. Kira's eyes glistened with emotion, but she quickly composed herself. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady yet warm. "Thank you for believing in me, even when things were at their darkest. Together, we'll make this company stronger than ever." As she walked through the building, familiar faces greeted her with warmth and respect. By the time she reached her office, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. Standing at the window, overlooking the bustling city, Kira allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. "They tried to silence me," she thought, her lips curling into a soft smile. "But they only made me stronger. Betrayal may cut deep, but it clears the way for truth and resilience." And with that, she turned back to her desk, ready to face the future with the unwavering determination of a woman who had rebuilt herself from the ashes.